Hello, and welcome to Money and People, the podcast that connects the dots between financial success and the power of human capital. Today, we are delighted to host a colleague and a friend, but someone who has made it through industry, rising from entry level right up to chief executive position. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Kulusu Chisola, CEO of Israelons. Morning, how are you?
Good morning, Henry.
And
How are
welcome
you?
to the show.
Thank you so much for the invite.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, like I said, he's a friend and a colleague, so I may know a bit, one or two things about him. But for the sake of the audience, who is Kulusu Chisola?
Okay. Look, it's hard to speak about oneself, from that much of an open question, but I'll try and address it. Well, I'm a father. I think that's one of my most important roles currently, and a husband. I'm a brother to a family of 5 siblings.
What
Um,
number are you?
I am second from the bottom, so I'm second youngest in
Okay.
the team. And I think I'm also what you'd call a professional in the financial services, where I've been pretty much my entire career. Um, so I think those are some of the high-level roles that I play uh, throughout my day-to-day life. But overall, I think I also consider myself as a pretty easygoing person. I like to spend time with family, friends. I like to enjoy myself. And I think it's a privilege for you to host me here today and for us to just go through some of these life experiences.
Okay. No, we're deeply honored. Tell me about your academic background.
All right. So, of course, I'll tell you about tertiary. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that's more
definitely.
relevant for our listeners and viewers. So, I did my studies at the Copperbelt University, where I studied for my accounting degree. And subsequent to that, of course, I upgraded with a master's. Um, I will let you know that I did have a cameo in ACCA, but interestingly, I got bored with majoring into the subject too much, so of accounting, that is. So I took one subject and then I packed it in. But ultimately, from a professional standpoint, I'm an accountant by training. But I have done financial services, specifically banking, microfinance, throughout. And I've never really specialized in the core work of
Yeah.
an accountant.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And if you were to credit somebody for inspiring you to take up accounting
Mm.
and to be, one of the best students and to utilize it the manner which you have, who would you credit that to?
Um, by the way, I hope you don't mind. I do take notes because I like to be thorough,
No,
to
definitely.
remember all aspects of a question.
I already took mine.
Anyway, here we are. You said who inspired me on the accounting profession.
Yeah.
Look, I had brothers and sisters who went before me. My older brother trained as an accountant as well. He did his CIMA later on. My sister started in the same stream with me in the accounting stream, financial services, but she then majored in business administration. Um, Interestingly, my younger sister is an ACCA as well. So there is that element in the family. I think we all had a slight bias towards that.
Was
But
it
what will
was
surprise
it
you?
dad or was it mom?
So I was going to tell you something interesting. That what will surprise you was that I actually wanted to be an architect, and a lot of people don't know that.
Oh wow.
Initially, when I was in secondary school, I developed a liking for buildings, structure, decorating. So I have an eye for that sort of thing. And I think I could have easily become an architect
Yeah.
at university, because it was the same university, Copperbelt University, that
Mhm.
offered that profession or that training. But I didn't do it. I think there was an element also of just thinking about which career path offered some of the best
Yeah.
opportunities for work.
Yeah.
So I think the decision then became around that. And I eventually fell into the accounting profession. So I wouldn't credit one person, but I would say it was a thinking around jobs and opportunities which crafted the final decision.
Okay. And interesting that you talk about architecture. Do you ever use that desire to be an architect in anything these days? Does that desire that you initially have help you in any way?
Yes, absolutely. I think it does. My wife lets me choose the curtains.
Oh wow.
So it's an interesting one, but that's a funny one. More importantly, I think on a day-to-day basis, I think I do have a liking for things that are well put together,
Yeah.
things that are well arranged, things that are pleasing over long enough periods of time. So if somebody has put in a good amount of thought into crafting that idea and it's something physical and visual, I think I tend to appreciate those types of things quite a lot on a personal level. So I think that's really the thinking that I carry on my day-to-day life. I think it also inspires some of the things I enjoy doing when I'm not working. I'm very observant. I always tell people that one of my favorite hobbies is people watching. I'll tell you what that is if you ask me.
I'm curious to know what that is.
It's observing. It's
It's ob-
effectively observing. You
yeah.
take a look at what's around you. You think, how was that formed? Where is
Yeah.
this going? So yes, I enjoy those types of things that are visual in nature.
Okay. So taking you back to the early years, at what point did you say, I'm a leader?
That's an interesting question. I don't think you say it to yourself. I think what typically happens is that uh, you do notice that people start to look up to you, seek your counsel, um, try and understand how you've achieved one or two things. And on the back of that, you realize that you're now building responsibility and accountability for the responses that you give, and that you need to think about what you say, think about what you do, because there are people who are looking to you or up to you. And I think it's in those moments that you begin to see that probably the leadership qualities have to begin to exemplify themselves more. Because people are actually getting impacted in a certain way as they relate to you. So I think that's what happens.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. And in your career journey, what sort of setbacks or challenges did you face that helped shape your work ethic and your style?
Um, Look, I wouldn't call all of them setbacks. I think they're learning points. That's the way I would look at it. I'll give you an example. In the early days of your career, once you're just leaving campus, and by the way, I had my first job at the age of 16. It was a clerical role in one of the commercial banks. At the time, their head office in Cairo Road. I was fresh out of grade 12. And during my gap year, I worked. And then I went into university subsequent to that. So the culture of beginning to do something and applying yourself started pretty early. And I think my parents noticed that I'm a very an easy person to sit down and do nothing.
Yeah.
So I started to push the boundaries very early. And because of that, you face challenges throughout your career. So I'll tell you one of the first challenges I faced. And I was very young then. So I thought that you could resign on the last day of the day you wanted to work because I was going to university. And so I left and thought, oh, I'll get paid. But I didn't read the lines in the contract which said, in lieu of notice.
In lieu of notice.
So you start learning those types of things very early once you start interacting in the work environment. So, and there have been several situations over time which teach you. I mean, throughout my university years, whenever I had the opportunity outside of the school semesters, I would then be working as well. So I learned some very important things in there as well. I spent some time in UTH as an intern there. Sobering, absolutely sobering. You learn a lot from there. You shed off things like entitlement. You understand that there's real human suffering as well. So all those things are teaching you. And then eventually I graduated from university, and then I got my first official job. And one of the things that hits you is that the money you're making at that time is not what you thought it would be.
Always.
It's always much less.
Yep.
And after 4 years of education, you feel a little bit shot in the head once that happens. But it's those types of things. And there are so many I can recount throughout my career which helped shape the thinking.
Yeah, interesting. Because I remember at uni, when we were in the graduation year, you'd always have people calling you managers, directors, this, and you have
Absolutely.
this perception that, if I'm being called this, the first job I'm going to get is a managerial role to probably come with a car and this, and then you show up. Sometimes you find yourself working for free, actually.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you couldn't have said it better. Personally, the first job I got straight out of campus wasn't a good one. It was a difficult one. Most people are familiar with our Buseko market. It was very close to there, right adjacent to the market. Very dusty area. There was a company being wound up. We were brought there. They wanted some assistance. We were fresh graduates. So you're busing it to go there. It's not the greatest of environments. There's no aircon in that office. So you start sobering up fairly quickly. But then we moved on from there quite quickly as well. And eventually I landed in Citibank. I believe that was 2006. And I think that's how I first entered the financial services.
Okay. And all of these experiences going to Buseko, working in UTH, do some of the principles learned from there still apply today?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. I'll tell you on a personal level, one of the big things that I'm very passionate about is talking to young people who are trying to rise in their own careers and who have an interest in sitting and listening. There's no shortcut. There's absolutely no shortcut. And every opportunity means something.
Yeah.
I mentioned my little cameo while I was in university on one of my breaks at UTH. Those things are so important for what you begin to believe about life, about people, about how much you need to apply yourself, because you see people who are challenged in different ways. At that point, you're probably about to graduate from school. You have an opportunity in life. You think that there's a journey which you're on, which will take you to your destination. And others are just trying to get better in hospital. So you have to start to see all those things front and center. Subsequent to that, you graduate, you get your first job, it's not great. You go into the bank, and even in the bank, I was a temp in my first job. I was a temporary employee in HR, of all places. So I did that, and it took a couple of months before I finally got a permanent position in the bank. So I think all those things are absolutely important, because it's those learnings which then help mold you into the type of person that can appreciate everything that's in front of you and keeps you grounded with whatever you might achieve.
Do you believe in mentorship? And if the answer is yes, what role did that play? And also, can you tell us your biggest mentor? Do you want to disclose?
You ask a very important question on mentorship. I've personally found that a lot of young people get stuck on this because in the classic way we imagine it, you think that you have to approach someone who you look up to, and then you ask them whether they are willing to take you up as a mentor, and then you have these formal meetings and one-on-ones to help you. Well, that could equally be useful, I think. But personally, I have found that I have gotten my mentorship largely through observation and listening. And the opportunity for that is absolutely vast, because anybody can mentor you. You just have to choose where you want to pay attention. So I'll give you a simple example. I've had some very good leaders in the past ahead of me. who are the people I report into. And I would never have sat down with them and said, okay, I would want you to mentor me in this way or that way. But I have watched. I've watched very closely how they position, how they listen, how they manage themselves. And through that, you are able to pick up quite a lot more than what you would get if you sat down one-on-one with somebody. So I think it's been quite invaluable for me that way. Of course, there are names who pop up in my mind who maybe I can say that person I learned some of the most important things from. But ultimately, it's been through a lot of that, just a lot of observation, a lot of listening at the right time to people who are probably industry experts, if it's in my industry, to thought leaders outside of the industry. I'm a huge fan of content, online podcasts, those types of things from industry leaders in various types of sectors. And that information really, I think I find invaluable in terms of mentoring yourself.
Okay. No, that's an interesting approach. I think you find in interactions a lot of people perceive mentorship as the structured format. You've been assigned this person, you have weekly meetings and so on and so forth. But I think I can also relate. Mentorship comes from so many different angles. I think the goal is to learn to be stronger, better, and so on. So whichever method was going to work for you. No, that's very insightful.
Yeah.
In terms of leadership and vision, what would you say has been the most important lesson that you've learned in your journey?
I think if I was to speak specifically on leadership and the biggest lesson I've seen, I think you need to have a great deal of self-awareness. I think that's absolutely vital. So I'm privileged or lucky because I think in the way I was raised, and maybe our parents did a pretty good job at this, you knew who you were very early. You knew that what happens, what doesn't happen, what your responsibilities are, where your accountabilities are. So as a person, you have a very strong sense of awareness. And I think those qualities help you quite a lot in your leadership journey, because I think one of the things that's significantly underestimated is leaders tend to have the power to raise or to tear down.
Yep.
And if you don't use that very carefully, very thoughtfully, you do more damage than good in real terms. So a lot of self-awareness, I think, is the biggest lesson over the years. I do recall, because of some of the functions I took up in my early work career, that they required a certain level of quality of work, delivery, speed, accuracy. And with that, I pushed teams quite hard.
Yep.
And you got the result, but it wasn't very pretty. But you got the result. And over time, you begin to learn that as much as this works, this is not how I want to be remembered in this place or defined. So you start to evolve on the basis of what you're learning about yourself, to keep your emotions in check, to make sure that you are building people as you're trying to deliver your ultimate goals in the team. So I think that self-awareness over the years has been my single biggest lesson. And now I'm at the position where in reality, I have to think about everything before I say it, because you can do a lot of harm if you're not self-aware as a leader.
Okay. One of the biggest things about leadership is decision making, making that final call. You work in a financial institution, high pressure, there are all these targets you have to achieve. If anything, usually targets are set, but no one ever pays attention to them. It's success is measured by the extent to which you exceeded your targets.
Yeah.
What steps do you make? What are the essential steps that you take in making high pressure decisions, especially in uncertain situations?
Yeah. I think you mentioned an important point at the end, uncertain. I think the difficulty in leadership positions is almost every decision is couched in uncertainty. I mean, that's why they're coming to you.
Yep.
Otherwise, either the clerk can make the decision,
Yep.
or the junior manager or the senior manager can pretty much make the decision. The reason why it's coming to you is probably because at every level of governance in the organization, that decision couldn't probably be made. So naturally, almost every decision you have to make is couched with a lot of uncertainty, um, a lot of possible concern also around the outcome of that decision. So it's something that you need to get used to. And I'll tell you something for free. I mean, I could be the only one who experiences this, but there's a significant level of anxiety that leaders go through, because your biggest sounding board is yourself, typically. You can't go to everybody in the organization and ask an opinion. You have your direct reports, maybe people will support you in running the business, but ultimately, a lot of the decisions, the buck stops with you.
Yep.
So after you've done everything, you've thought through everything, you've consulted widely, you still have to make a call. And chances are that there will still be just a significant level of uncertainty left before the decision is made, and you have to make it. So I think some of the things that work for me, the first thing is really around take your time. Take your time. You can't rush through problematic situations. So typically, when somebody is sitting in front of me and they're telling me this is going wrong, significantly wrong, could be a major issue to do with a regulator, it could be a staff issue which is significantly problematic, could be a fraud issue, which, by the way, in financial services is part of your business as usual. You're constantly managing those risks. So you sit there, and the first thing you have to have as the number one tool in dealing with uncertainty and decision making is take your time. Take your time.
Okay. No, that's very interesting. There's no need to rush. And if you want to get it right, I think spend more time.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, no, definitely. And in terms of innovation, innovation comes with a lot of creativity, comes with a lot of, different ideas coming together. How do you foster that in your organization, and how successful have you been in using innovation to push boundaries?
Well, I think a lot of that sits within the culture of the organization. And I always say the custodian of culture really is the CEO in reality. So you sort of have to have
Wait, just say that again.
the custodian of culture is the CEO. That's what I believe. And
So why do people think it's HR?
it's not. In my personal experience, it's not, because, and I'll circle back to something I said earlier. Based on the responsibility of office, you can do a lot of good and you can do a lot of harm. That doesn't come from HR. HR can be what they can be, but HR reports in the MD's office. So you can manage the temperature in HR and the interaction which takes place in there with other employees as well, because that's your responsibility. And typically, the human capital manager or head might report into you as well. So you can manage the temperature in there as well. But in your office, if people can't walk in because they feel that we can't talk to this guy, you have a bigger problem. So the issues around innovation, I think, circulate around the culture in the organization, which really, as the CEO, you're very responsible for. Takes me back to the issue of self-awareness. Because you can create a culture of fear in the organization, you can create a culture of openness, you can create a culture of innovation, where people are free to speak about their ideas, implement, execute, and they don't get judged for it or shut down in a certain way. So you're really responsible for building that culture that engenders a sense of people coming into the office with their best thinking caps on and throw ideas around and try stuff. So I think that's the way I look at it. Get the culture right, the innovation leads.
The innovation will follow. No, that's fantastic. And in terms of leadership today, we have had different kinds of, leadership thoughts, schools over generations. What do you think is essential for leaders in present day? And I would narrow it down to present day Zambia.
Okay. Look, I think it does depend on, I don't know, maybe the sector. So I wouldn't want to place you know, a blank
Yeah.
canvas on it. I think it really does depend. Also, it does depend, by the way, on the stage of the organization.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you one thing, I've worked in startups before. Um, I mentioned Citibank, but I left Citibank to join EcoBank. EcoBank was in a house when I joined. In a house.
When did you, that was around just before 2010, wasn't it?
Yes, I
Yeah.
joined, it was 2009, I
Yeah.
believe. It was in a house, not the buildings you see today.
So you're
And
the pioneers of EcoBank. You're the, what do they call them? The godfathers of
Well, we
EcoBank.
were there pretty early, I can tell you that. Many people would not know that EcoBank was once in a house just off
I'm only
Tabon
hearing
Road.
this for the first time. I've always
Yes,
just seen it where it is, in a
yes.
building structure. So it was in a house.
It was in a house. It was called the project office. And we were probably 20 in there. And we were some of the first employees in the company. So
I hope
when
they
you,
call you for anniversary days and things like that.
no, we have
Because,
groups, alumni, and
yeah,
everything. So
yeah.
all that is there. But where I was going with that is that the leadership skills which are required in that sort of setup where you're trying to build something from scratch are probably slightly a bit different from what's required in a real matured organization where there's structure, there's a lot of organization which has already been built up. So in there, you may realize that you need to be very agile. You need to be able to multitask many different areas where leadership might be required. Maybe subject matter experts haven't even been recruited in those areas, but people are there and they're looking up to the few leaders who are in the house at that time, and they expect you guys to provide direction. What should a policy look like? How do we get the licensing sorted out with the regulators? When do we open? What do we need to set up the bank? So in that moment, the essentials of leadership get taken down a few levels lower. You know, you can't be this person standing on top of an anthill and issuing instructions. At that point, you're a bit more tactical, you're closer to the ground, you're closer to your people, you're trying to solve things on a day-by-day basis. So I think I wouldn't say there are specific essential requirements related to organizations. I think it's dependent on the way the organization is structured, at which point. But I think there are some core values at personal level which you ought to have. I think I mentioned people look up to you, so they expect honesty, they expect integrity. People should feel they can trust you. That matters a lot to people. So I think those are some of the things which I would say are overarching, regardless of where you find yourself in. So those are really hardcore.
Okay. It's interesting, especially, and I like the fact that you delved into, especially startups or small organization. The buzzword right now is micromanagement or toxic culture. How do you ensure that leadership where, I mean, it's a startup, you need to get certain results delivered. You don't have full structure. You only have few dependencies. How do you ensure that it's not looked at as micromanagement or toxicity or, all of these buzzwords which are sort of coming up right now?
Yeah, so I mean, a couple of things there. Number one, I think, by the way, I have a huge problem with buzzwords because I think it's become built into popular culture of the Gen, what are they called?
Gen Z,
Yeah.
our friend.
And I think people say all those types of things. No, this is toxic. No, I'm being gaslighted.
Yes.
No, I mean, let's be practical about what's going on. Firstly, you mentioned things like, okay, it's a smaller organization trying to grow itself. It is tough, full stop. If you're in a small organization that's trying to grow, it is tough, full stop, because there's a lot at stake. So everybody has to have skin in the game, from a leadership all the way up to the cleaner. They have to have skin in the game, because you're not going to come out of that startup stage if you don't have that. So I would expect in that sort of environment, regardless of who the leader is, that it's going to be pedal to the floor.
Yep.
Where the rubber meets the road, there will be smoke. And
Definitely.
we have to deal with that.
Mhm.
It's also important, though, and it keeps circling back to what I said earlier, a lot of self-awareness is important, because you need to be very clear that you're pushing people very hard in that environment. And you need to recognize when to flex um, that intensity, when to acknowledge great results, when to encourage, while at the same time trying to drive absolute performance out of your teams. So I think it's a very fine balance in there, but I think let's put aside issues of, okay, fine, yes, you could have environments where maybe leaders are a bit toxic and yeah, that happens. But I'll give you my personal experience, because I think I can share it. It's never always been perfect throughout your career. There are incidences or times when you feel, I can't work with this person, but you're there. That is your job.
Yep.
Okay, you could look for another one. That's also fine. But as long as you don't have that other one, you have an opportunity in there to apply yourself, to do something, to contribute, to learn something, which you can use elsewhere if you so decide to leave at some point. But if you sit there and then pick up all the coin phrases from the internet and try and use them to describe your situation, there's no help coming. That's my personal view. So you have to take that up, and you have to look at the positives in there and push on from there. And I'm one of those people, maybe it's an upbringing issue, who would never say, this is happening to me because of that person. Okay? So you take absolute ownership. If you don't like the environment you're in, pick what you can from there, grow from there, and get yourself into a new environment. That's how this thing works.
But even then, what guarantee is there that you won't find the same or worse?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you have to learn. You have to evolve as a person. And those skills, those personal skills, I think some of our Gen Zs, as you call them, need to learn from that. Because you see it a lot in the office, a lot of entitlement. I have young people coming to my office all the time,
Yeah.
because I have an open door structure. I tell them, come, let's talk about it. We'll spend half an hour in there. By the time we're done, they're probably thinking, okay, maybe I was being a little bit too soft on myself. Because when you ask someone the hard questions, and I'll tell you, sometimes I've done this to some of my teams. I tell them, pick a job in the company which you know you're qualified for and which you deserve better than the person who's sitting there. We're just the two of us. Tell me which job that is. Most of them struggle to even say which job it is. They have no clarity of thought around what they want, why they should deserve it better than the person who's there, what they have done to earn it better than the person who is there. So when you start going and interrogating these kinds of questions a little deeply, you realize that sometimes people are very soft on themselves, and an entitlement culture breeds in, and that doesn't help you in terms of career growth.
So entitlement actually can destroy your career, isn't it? Because you feel you're entitled to X, entitled to Y, but the company has to move in a certain direction and you all have to be aligned to it.
Absolutely. Let me tell you the only thing you're entitled to. The only thing you're entitled to is your dreams. Okay? And you must dream big and very clearly. You're entitled to that. So you have to have your big vision around where you want to be. We may not have touched on this directly, but I'll tell you now that the thought around being CEO of a financial institution was birthed 10 years ago, way before I was anywhere near there. Actually, I met my wife at a campus in my 4th year, and she knows the historical context of how we've navigated through life. And the conversation around wanting to do this at this level in financial services is a very old conversation. So every decision mattered. Every opportunity mattered. And every setback was a moment of learning.
Learning.
Sorry. But was there ever a moment when I felt that the dream is unattainable? No. Because the plan was so clarified around all the difficult steps it takes. You need to learn something to begin with. So go take the internship job. You are not happy with the pay, fine. Keep working. Get noticed. Build your network within the organization. Apply for that internal promotion, job interview. Apply yourself to learn new things in the organization. These are other tricks, by the way, which I'll share for free. I always did work which was outside of my core job, something I wasn't being paid for, and something which I could do after finishing my work. So you get your work done at 4 p.m. and you tell your supervisor, oh, I like what they do in that department.
Can I go?
So you sit there for the remaining 1 hour of the day and you do something. File their documents, ask questions, sit next to the subject matter expert. You learn tremendously great things by doing that sort of thing. So, but you have to do that intentionally with a view of what you're gaining in that process. And therefore, when you now find yourself where the final opportunity is there and you're a chief operating officer, which was my position prior to becoming MD, and the opportunity to go to the next level is there, now you know that all your 10, 15 years of hard work, clarity of roles and training and learning are crystallizing in that moment. And you become a natural pick at that point. Somebody just points you out in the room and they say, you're next.
And no one
And it ends
disputes
there.
it. Yeah, it's obvious. But I think it's important what you say. You tend to find a scenario where 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. it's clock out time. I'm heading out. But the thing is, usually in your 8 to 5, you can't really do anything else apart from your job. It's what you do after everybody has knocked off or before anybody has showed up. I think for me, if you ask me, that's what gets you the promotion, because you're now going over and beyond in doing what you want. So I think it's a good lesson for Gen Zs. It's not always about the pay, but it's important to go over and beyond, especially if you want to be growing in your career. So we encourage you to put in that extra effort.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I may jump in
Yeah.
here, because you've picked up on an important word, promotion. I always tell people that the greatest amount of progress in your career happens off cycle. You human capital practitioners will know what cycle means. Cycle means year end. You get to the year end. Well, I'll tell you now what happens at the year end. Everyone gets inflationary adjustments because that's what the market is doing. Okay. And if your organization so happens to be generous in that year, they give a little bit extra. Then they recognize this person and that person, you get a certificate. Okay, that's fine. But if you want real progress, people have to mention your name outside of that cycle. That's where the real progress comes from. So mid-year, throughout the year, people are talking about what needs to happen with you. It may happen at year end, but it's more likely to happen within the year. Because when talent is recognized within the organization, the institution, if it's a fair system, is desperate to acknowledge that talent and to build it up because they don't want to lose you. So you have to make yourself indispensable. You have to make yourself an off-cycle employee, the type of person whom, when there's a conversation about people taking place where you're not, they're talking about you. And when that happens, these stages we talk about from entry level, clerical, supervisor, manager, senior manager, chief this, director this, CEO, they come much, much faster.
I actually totally agree. I think one of my great moments in working was, well, it was gossip, but still, where you find somebody, maybe your boss or somebody senior to you, comes and says, "Oh, we're actually in a meeting. We're talking about you today, and we're saying that you're not even in the meeting. You're not part of the agenda. Somebody just mentions your name, and everybody's in agreement, and so on." I can't think of a greater feeling than that, being talked about in a positive light in a meeting of executives. I think it's just a different feeling.
You're spot on.
Yeah.
You're spot on.
So let's take it back home just a little bit. You talked about being a father, being a husband, sibling, and so on and so forth, and balancing a career, a demanding one. How do you navigate the two? How do you achieve work-life balance?
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
First of all, can you achieve work-life balance? Let's start with that. Is it possible? And then if it is possible, how do you do it?
Yeah, it's a tough one, eh? I think it's a really tough one. Look, I'll tell you my personal opinion. The experience could be different from person to person, but and I'll take you back to a word I mentioned. I say dream, eh?
Yeah.
Something you're entitled to as a person. When your dreams are big enough, unfortunately, there tends to be a lot of sacrifice. And that sacrifice is not just from you, but it's also from the people you care a lot about. They have to be with you. I'm very lucky to have a very supportive wife. We've talked about all the things that we want to do for a very long time. And we go through these stages as a family collectively, knowing the amount of quote unquote pain that you have to go through, because you have to be dedicated, you have to be committed to make these things happen. And therefore, the sacrifices are across the board. Um, and you have to ask that of the people that are around you. So family is important, extended family, it could be your siblings, it could be your spouse, even your children are important.
Yeah.
Because they ask questions when they get to a certain age. So I think it's a very difficult one to fully gain that work-life balance. But also, I think intentionality matters. Trying your best um, to create structure around everything. When it's family time, you try and be there, you try and be present, you try and contribute. When it's work time, you do that as well. When it's playtime. So it's important to have structure. I think it helps you even achieve those career goals which you like. But without a shadow of doubt, there are sacrifices and people have to be willing to take them on. But there are also benefits. So we shouldn't pretend that if you are in certain roles or job positions, there are not things in there which everybody likes to enjoy. Everybody wants to have the nice holiday, or to drive the better car, or whatever it is that makes you happy as a person. So all those little things are good, but they come with some level of effort and sacrifice. So you have to be prepared for that. So I think the work-life balance is a tough one. And I think it's something which you can't say you've locked this down. It's closed there now, and I can't improve this further. I think it continues to improve throughout your career and as you transition out of your career potentially.
Okay. No, I think the sacrifice bit is important, but also, making the stakeholders, so to say, understand to say, I'm not home at 17 hours because this is what I'm working on, and the benefits will come. We can't get the holiday if we don't push. We can't. I think and also being present in the moment. I think if you're going to be at work, you should be working. And if it's going to be pleasure time, should be like 100%.
Yeah.
And not, I think sometimes the challenge comes in people confusing the two when you're home and you're doing this and that. But I think finish work, be home. I think it sort of eases the burden a little bit. I think that's what I've experienced. And in terms of career challenge,
Yeah.
what has been your biggest and how did you overcome it?
Look, ultimately, I think leading people is the single biggest challenge. And I mean this at a person to person level. Yeah, you could say by default of job position you're leading, but no. What I'm talking about is that everybody comes with something. Everybody is coming from somewhere.
Yeah.
People arrive in the office. Some you don't know their situation domestically, but you're trying to get a result for the business, and therefore, the question is, how do you get the most out of your people, out of your teams to drive your results? So that you are successful in your career. I think that's the toughest one because it requires a lot of constant questioning of the plan, um, sounding things off with yourself, with others. Are we doing the right things here? Are we taking care of our people in the right way? Are they happy to come? Which, by the way, is a big thing for me. People don't necessarily have to be happy with everything in the organization. Typically, actually, people are unhappy with their pay. You find that a lot.
Always.
But they need to be comfortable coming to the office in the morning. Okay? That's very important because that moment when you wake up and you don't want to go is a very bad feeling. Nobody deserves to feel that way. So, at least not at the behest of the leadership and whatever it is they do in the organization. Someone can want to leave, but they should not have a problem getting up and coming to the office. They should be saying, okay, I want a different opportunity. I want to go somewhere else. I want to build myself because this organization limits me. But you don't want people struggling to come. So I think the biggest thing for me has been that the person-to-person connection. I'll tell you something, again, which I learned. Do you know how important it is to call people by their names when you're a leader? I struggle with this because sometimes the teams are so big and you don't know people by name. But there's so much power in a room of 50 people when you call someone by their name and they didn't think you knew them in the organization or what they do, and you ask for a contribution from them. So that people-to-people connection, I think, is the biggest struggle. If you can hone some skills around that, I think it will take you infinitely further in your leadership function.
Okay. Great. And in terms of criticism, how do you, I'm sure you get criticized in your work by the board, by, peers, staff, and so many other people, but how do you take it and how do you manage it?
So first thing is, at least among peers and potentially even lower than peers, which I do quite a lot, ask for the feedback. Ask for the feedback in an environment that allows people to feel comfortable to tell you. This is something people don't do enough, even, for example, in appraisals. We talk about this in theory, do a 360 and what, but it's not really happening that way. When you're in the room, it becomes a one-sided conversation. You did that, you didn't do this. But that question never comes of, tell me what you think I'm not doing well. And if the organization culture is such that people are free enough, they will absolutely tell you. They will mention the moment. They'll say, we didn't like what you said or how you said it, or we think that you panic when there's a big problem in the organization and you spread fear. They'll give you that feedback. So you could take that as criticism or you could take it as positive feedback. But ultimately, I think in your position, in your role, it helps you so much if you have accurate feedback. So take it in. Take it in from as many places. Take it in from your spouse. Take it in from the board. Take it in from your peers, juniors, everybody. And then sit back, think about it when you're in a calm place, and then see how you can build from there.
Interesting. So it also enhances your self-awareness, isn't it? Because you also get, sort of tries to confirm or, refute what you think you are aware of. It's sort of, no,
Absolutely.
That's great. And in terms of tomorrow, or the future, I should put it, what skills do you think will be most important for leaders? We're heading into 2025 and beyond. What do you think will be essential for leadership success?
Yeah. I mean, we did talk about this earlier slightly. And I think I already likened it to, the stage of the organization matters in terms of what leadership skills you require. But I talked about some of the hardcore values, which I think are overarching. You have to be honest. People have to be able to trust you. You have to be competent. And you definitely have to have a way with people as well. How you communicate with people. You have to have good communication skills. So I think those are some of the overarching ones. but on a day-by-day level, depending on the nature of the organization, it may require you to draw on certain capabilities more than others through the journey.
Okay, great. Personally, if you could go back and give your younger self a piece of career advice, what would it be?
So remember, I started a lot of these conversations with self very early. I think I would have probably achieved more, and I'm not talking about job position. I'm talking about situations. I think you would probably achieve more if you listen more to what those who've done something before or those who have something really impactful to say are saying. So spend a little bit more time listening. Slow down. I learned this thing. I was on a visit to one of our group offices in Ghana, and I was sitting then with the head of O&T in Ghana. And
What's O&T?
Oh, sorry, operations and technology. So he was a peer, but in Ghana.
Yeah.
I was the head of operations and technology
yeah.
in Zambia here for the bank. And I was trying to explain something to him. He asked me, okay, well, how is this working in Zambia? And I was really trying to troubleshoot very quickly. He was a much more experienced person than me. I think he had been in the bank probably 15 years or more, very senior and widely respected person. And the first thing he said is, take it easy. And I think that was good guidance. He just said, take it easy, because I was trying to really troubleshoot. So yeah, I think listen a little bit more, slow down, and let it come to you. You'll be fine.
That's very, I will keep that.
Yes.
I will definitely keep that. And what final advice or insight would you like to share with our viewers on achieving career success?
I think in terms of advice, I feel like a career is, it could be different for different people. Some people are called career people.
Yep.
But I also think personally it's an intermediary step to something else. I'll circle back to some words I've used already. What's the dream? Okay. Yes, there was a desire to lead in financial services, but I think what I would want to personally achieve is quite different from just that position or what it offers. It's about your impact on people, on society, on your children, on your family. Those things matter a lot. And therefore, when you talk about, look, career in itself, I think it's really about what it is that your big goal is. What are you trying to achieve for yourself? A career sometimes can be a means to an end, in the sense that you have learned skills in there. You are able to look after your family. It's important. There's earnings you're getting from there. That's important too. You meet new people, interactions in there. They open new avenues for different types of opportunities. Maybe your goal is to be an entrepreneur and go into farming, and you are in financial services. But what can you learn from that journey, which takes you to your ultimate goal? I think that's the way I look at it. So focus on that big picture. Stay true to it. Never mind the turbulence. It's okay. You don't get far unless you fly, but at 45,000 feet, there's turbulence there. Okay? So you have to be prepared for all that. But it's part of the journey. So take it as a journey. Stay focused on the big goal. That goal may be outside of the position which you've dreamt about, but it takes you closer and closer to reaching your ultimate purpose. And I think it's important for everyone to find that thing within themselves. What's your purpose?
Kulusu, it's been an honor having you. Okay, thank you so much for making it. And it was a very, very insightful conversation.
Thank you, Henry.
Personally, I've learned a lot, and I hope our viewers out there have picked up a lesson or two. And if you like the podcast, please remember to like, comment, and share. Tell your friends to tell their friends. And if you have anything to share about leadership, rising right up to the top, please let us know in the comments section. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.